Okay. Good morning, everyone. Hope you're doing good. No much hangover from yesterday? Maybe from some?
No, I am.
We are fresh. Everything will be okay. So thank you for being here to our presentation about the quest of Tableau server at Pictet Asset Management. I'm Pierre-Benoît Querton. I'm the product owner for Tableau at Pictet Asset Management. I'm working in the data and business intelligence team with some of people here. And we have Tudor.
And I'm Tudor. I'm the analytics ninja who produces all the reports. I work in the finance department for this entity that we call Pictet Asset Management. And I'm the one with the numbers. I'm the analytics guy. So before we get started, I'd like to slightly introduce what we do and where we're from. And what is Pictet Asset Management? So Pictet Group is a private bank. It's a big private bank in Switzerland, Geneva. And Pictet Asset Management is the corporate division of that entity. So we deal with institutional clients. And just like any large company, we have management. So we have the board of directors, the CEOs, the CFOs, the VPs, all the head of sales who essentially consume and make all the decisions. And we've got three principal divisions with which we work for. Specifically, we'll get to that a bit later, but these three entities are our clients, internal clients. We've got the investment side. These are the portfolio managers, the asset managers, the people, some of them in this room actually, who manage the accounts and who track the performance and ensure that stocks go up and buy low, sell high, those people. We've got the sales side, distribution. So in other words, we've got the marketing, the sales, the people who sell the products to the clients across all over the world. And we've got the support functions, which is where Pierre-Benoît and I are located. So this includes operations, IT, finance, HR, compliance, and that's where I'm from. I work in finance. So all these four entities are our internal clients. So this kind of gives you a bit of a context as to what we do here. So without further ado, I'd like to let Pierre-Benoît start us on his Tableau journey and explain to you how we reached our end goal with Tableau. Take it away.
Thanks. Thank you, Tudor. So, yeah, quest of self-service. Well, like any quest, it needs an adventure. Like any adventure, you need a good story. So, once upon a time, there was this company looking at its BI landscape and its user and realizing that a lot of people were doing data exploration, creating visualization, creating statistics, crunching the number, using a large variety of tools. People were using Excel, like everybody actually, or using R or Python. We even had one of our users generating more than 200 JPEGs with an R script, merge that into a PowerPoint, share to 100 of users, and I'm pretty sure some of them actually printed all that stack to just see one or two dashboards. And probably for those of you, those kind of stories sounds familiar. I see some people nodding. We realized that actually this scattered landscape is difficult to manage. Ensuring that the data are available to everyone, ensuring that the tools are up to date, ensuring that you provide the right support to your community is difficult when you have such a variety of user, of usage, and of tools. So PAM, Pictet Asset Management, basically we take a step back and we were looking at what we have. And we saw that we needed to unify this BI landscape. We also realized that we have already an existing community. We had people that already exposed to data, have an understanding of data. Very intelligent people with different backgrounds. We had economists, we have a mathematician, we have IT people who moved to the dark side of the business. Sorry, I should not say that. Anyway. They were all interested into data. They were all interested of sharing the information in the most efficient way. And sending an Excel spreadsheet by email, which is after forward to another and another, is definitely not efficient. Because basically at some point you want to try to understand where is the latest version, what's your single version of the truth, I would say. So we took all of that. We were thinking, okay, they all want to have this information sharing. We need to have one tool, and we need something that is easy to be deployed and introduced to existing user with data experience, but also to new user. And as Tudor said, we are part of a group. So we already had Tableau in the radar. It was not deployed anywhere else in the group, but some people were playing with it. And we said, okay, let's take this tool and let's try our journey. So we hit the road. And our road started actually back in 2015, where a team composed of actually 2 persons, one of them is right here, which is not their full-time job, but anyway, we're initiating this experiment, this POC, start to talk and identify business case from different departments to try to identify if Tableau could be a good tool to make an impact on the day-to-day work, trying to find business case where we can replace hundreds of Excel spreadsheets to something more fancy that is more impactful. We found 2 of them in 2 different departments because we wanted to have different angle of the tool. And we sit down with them, and we sit down with the business user. We identify the business case, the data. We start with them to learn data visualization. They were not used to that. So we had to give them the tools, the vocabulary. We also have, for some of them, to explain how the database works. How do you need to structure your data? And during basically 6 months, we've been working very closely and learning ourselves from an IT side, how does it work? This works beyond expectation, actually. People were sharing their visualization to other users who had also Tableau Desktop, because we start to have requests within those 2 departments of also playing with the tool. It generates interest. We also shared the tool, the result of the dashboards with Tableau Reader at the time. And without noticing, we realized that it worked just great. So we decided that it was time to deploy Tableau Server, which we did, and growing the audience of the visualization created by user. Our first Tableau Server was one machine, one single server with a core-based license, allowing us to have unlimited number of users. It was great. And then the team started to deploy more and more the tool within different departments. During 1.5 years, people from marketing, from HR, from finance, and other divisions start to say, wow, great, let's use it. And we start to reduce little by little the number of tools. Excel, well, still around, but less used to produce reports and figures and communicate. And the road looked great. So it said, okay, no problem, we can relax and continue to that. But like any road, there is always a roadblock. So we introduced, no, not VLC, but we realized that there was a first issue with the performance. We start to have complaints from our users saying, hey, you know, the subscription arrived late. The extraction are delayed. This visualization you see here is actually not rendering fast. So something's wrong. And actually, we realized that the performance issue came from 2 sides. The first one was probably the way we introduce best practices, in the fact that we may have not introduced all the best practices we should, and more importantly, we did not introduce or put in place monitoring of the best practice, ensure that actually what we're saying to people, they're actually doing it. So we were not able to anticipate. The second issue that we realized was more from a licensing issue. We were hitting the limitation of the core license. It's great, you can open to everyone, but you're limited in terms of machine, and you need, unfortunately, to pay more if you want to increase. So Pam decided to say, okay, let's continue the initiative because there is a great potential. We already have 400 users. To give you an idea, Pam is more or less 1,000 employees. So we already had 40% of adoption rate. So During 2017, during the third quarter, there was a decision to shift from a core-based license model to a subscription-based license model. And those things is not done overnight. It takes a bit of time, so all the processing and of changing the contract and so on. So we've been able to shift it. We're still increasing our number of users. And we took the opportunity to actually redeploy Tableau, but this time in a distributed environment. So from one mono machine, we just moved to a dual node environment. And it works great. I mean, people were happy. The visualization started to be faster to render. The subscription arrived on time. The extraction was better. And we start to introduce as well some policies, number of extraction, concurrent extraction, the time, the duration of those extractions. All of those things start to be little by little introduced to our early adopters and the new user. This first performance issue, this first roadblock, actually make Pam realizing that having a team that is not fully dedicated to Tableau, although is a possible to make the deploy within the company, but you need a focal point. You need someone who can be the central entry point for every single aspect that touch Tableau within the company. And that's why in 2018, they introduced the role of the product owner, me, basically. The idea during the first two quarters was to do an analysis of where we stand. Is the architecture enough to support the growing number of users? Is the content done properly? Like when you get a new house, you're searching that there is no hole between the kitchen and the room. We basically did the same. Say, okay, let's look under the hood, see if everything was fine. And we decided to move to the next scale, and we had 2 additional nodes to really separate the backgrounder from the other processing in order to ensure that we won't have another hit of, hey, suddenly is everything, so are you slow? We wanted to anticipate that. And we realized that after the fact that all of those content that were created was somehow a mess in a way. We hit our second major roadblock, which is the content governance. With so many users, it was great. It's a great tool. People do quickly the analysis, but they don't think necessarily how to manage that content. How long should it last? And we did not probably prepare properly our site administrator. And we also had a lot of sites, which is sometimes very difficult to manage. And we introduced 10.5 at the moment with this feature that allows us to finally do project within project, which was enabling us to reorganize the content, merge sites together, create synergies, sharing the same data set that was published in 2 different sites. It's a tedious work. Really, don't underestimate. If some of you are already on this road, or if this road rings bells to you, and you haven't yet issue with content management, think about it quickly, because it really takes time to correct the road. However, although we had this issue, it did not stop the appetite of Tableau within the company. Actually, quite the contrary. Recently, at the beginning of the year, we acquired additional licenses, and we are now approaching more than 90% of our adoption rate, which is, when we look at it, in 4 years and a half, quite good. Yeah, good. Thank you. Oh, sorry. On the... So, those roadblocks is common. You will see it if you haven't deployed Tableau yet, or you encountered them. But those are just 2 roadblocks among many other. Some are more important, some are smaller, some may have small impacts on the short term, but long impact on the long run. This is normal. We made mistakes. Mistake is okay, as long as you learn from them, as long as you're capable of shifting quickly to a solution that allow you to just move forward. And when we look at back, we actually had 4 major categories. That is, well, not surprising. You will see the same about roadblocks. Think about your governance, obviously. Think about how you want to structure your site. Your POC is probably great with a small t, but how do you want to manage when you want to scale up to the entire company? Or if you need to have regions that are more dedicated, maybe you need a site for East region and another site for West region, or from a department structure point of view. Think about the policies, or the governance, or how to enforce it. Don't see policies as a bad thing. We don't see it as a negative element, saying, okay, your extraction should last no longer than 1 hour. This is not a punishment. It's actually building trust and confidence in the platform for your user. They will know where to behave. And it's easier to implement policy before than after. Otherwise, you may look like the bad guy. But think about it. Obviously, the role and responsibility, that's quite obvious, but at least it's stated. We have on our intranet the name of every person in the Tableau team, or who to contact for a certain data warehouse that we manage, so we know where to go. The second element is your onboarding process, your training. Think about how you want to deploy Tableau and the knowledge of data visualization to your end user. We needed to manage the learning expectation. Not that the tool is complicated and difficult to learn, it's just for people who've never been exposed to data and analysis, understanding how visualization and analytics works takes time. It's not something that you do in a week or two. You need to practice and practice. You need to be close to your end user. Think about who's going to use Tableau. Are they only creators? People who will just create the dashboard for someone else? Or are you going to have site administrator, people who will manage the site and the content and the role? Or do you only have project leader that just look at a subset of your content? Adapt your training. Don't give even all the training that covers everything. Even if you are a small company, it may look easier, but it's better if you separate that. Communication, well, we're here. The Tableau is all about community, otherwise we would not be here. It's a great thing. It's very important. Manage the word of mouth. During the POC, what we realized is that people were so excited and enthusiastic about the tool that they were starting to explain what the tool is to other colleagues who hasn't been introduced by the Tableau team or the champion, the tool itself. And fortunately or unfortunately, it depends, we had misconception. People were thinking that Tableau is the new data warehouse. I heard people saying, oh great, I have all the data in Tableau, I don't need database, I can do my data entry within, easy peasy. Or even advanced user who said, I don't care if my dashboard is slow on my computer, it will be faster on the server. All those elements are unfortunately sometimes misunderstood. I'm not saying that we explain it badly, it's just that they make their own ID based on what they've heard. So to avoid that, communicate, be close to your user, go to demo, do demo for new user. Explain what's the difference between Tableau Desktop and Tableau Server. Explain new feature to your existing user. Don't think that they will by themselves know how there is a new feature. You have to introduce that. Do workshop, do tab doctors, do all of those things. That creates a bond between you, the provider of the platform, and your community. And it's also, even though it takes time, a great return. You have people that will come to you with new idea and thinking, oh, now it's maybe the time to introduce Python and integrate with Python, have a business case for you. Let's do something. We identify champion because they're certainly having more. You realize that someone that was working on his own side, because you probably not cover everybody, but he grows skills very quickly and very high. Rely on that person. You may also identify issue that was not on your radar, and you can quickly act on it. So although it takes time, do it. And it's actually fun to do it. Last but not least, sorry, the architecture, the deployment. Don't go with your POC server on production. Otherwise, you have an issue of performance and core license. Ring a bells? Size it. Think about how you want to deploy, if you decide to move forward with Tableau, how you want to deploy the tool. Think about monitoring the tool as well. Not only the fact that the server is running out of memory or running out of disk space, look at how people use it, how they behave. Potentially, you can create some sort of behavioral map to allow you to identify these kinds of people use Tableau in that way, some people using it in the other way. It also helps you to proactively find issue. You can certainly have alerts, create alerts, say, hey, when you have a dashboard that is taking way too long, you can have a notification and go proactively to your user and say, hey, Tudor, your dashboard is once again too slow. No, sorry. It's those kinds of things that will really also create a community and a trust between you and the user. So if we look at a step back, how we've been doing it, well, setting off into the unknown is probably not the right title of that slide, but we were not sure where to go anyhow. So what we did, we had our challenge. Okay, we don't know how to unify our business landscape. We choose Tableau. We said, okay, let's cycle through it. So call it agile, call it lean, call it whatever you want, but it actually works. We did our prototype, we did our mistake, we had our issue with the scale-up. We decide to move forward, and we decide to open it to the entire company. The advantage of that we saw, and again, it's our view, is that it really helped us to reduce the time to market. We've been able to open quickly Tableau to everyone and create the appetite, create the interest into the tool. And we've been able, sometimes with some hurt, but to introduce gradually some governance, some policies in order to manage. We had at some point more than 2,000 subscriptions with so small community. Tableau became actually our mailing system. So we needed to go back to the user and say, hey guys, it's nice to have an email, but actually go to the site, go to your dashboard directly. You will have more interaction. Don't focus only on your creator, focus as well on your viewer, the consumer of the data. Explain to them what's the advantage of having a filter that has been built by a creator, how it can help them on their day-to-day job. And this was done from, well, not only by the product owner, but at least we had a role where people can go to. And at PAM, we categorize or set the role of the product owner like this. I'm not going to read that, don't worry. Probably I should. No. We decided that the product owner will have a variety of roles, but one that I would like probably to focus on is the bridging between business and BI team. A lot of time I have user coming to me, Pierre, I want this dashboard. It's exactly what I need. I look at it, but hey, you in HR, this is marketing or finance, how that thing helped you. And as Tableau is at kind of the end of the chain, it's the end result of your data processing, your data pipeline, your analysis. People think that, okay, this is where I will find my information. And when you start talking with them, with the new user, with his new business case, you realize that they're not looking for the dashboard itself. They're actually looking at the data. They're seeking for information. They don't know where to find it. Probably is it because a dashboard is not well tagged or described somewhere in the site. Maybe they don't know it exists, or maybe it simply does not exist. But they don't know where to find the raw material, the raw data. But you, as a product owner, You have a visibility across the company. I'm talking to all departments. I'm talking to HR, to marketing, to finance, to risk, to performance, to all those people. So you have a kind of a 360 degree. You don't know all the nitty-gritty detail. That's impossible. But at least you know where to find the person who can actually answer the initial business question. So it's just a matter after of putting those two persons together with you probably as well and try to find a way to provide the data or the dashboard. That's really where you bridge the gap between users among themselves, but also sometimes realizing that the data that was looking for does not exist. So we hook with the data warehouse team, where they'll say, okay, we need to ingest external partner, external provider for new data. And this helps us to actually have a large number of dashboards and workbook, a lot of users, but a lot of interest as well. This is just a dashboard that we use to actually show off to other users, hey, your dashboard is there, this site is doing better. Kind of a competition, it's good. And it also kind of creates a Darwin approach when you're realizing that some of the dashboard that people were spending a lot of time is never used, so they actually clean it themselves. This was so far a success, 90%, more than 90% of adoption within the company. But we've been able to do it thanks to an onboarding process. And honestly, we did not invent the wheel. There is nothing magical in there. I'm pretty sure a lot of people who already have Tableau here already use the same approach. When we have someone coming to us, we look at what is your business case. We want something valuable. We want something that makes an impact. We don't want to provide the tool to someone say, yeah, Tableau is cool, I want the same thing, I want the green thing and the blue thing. That doesn't work. I mean, you're going to waste our time and the time of the business user. Sorry, next one. However, the person comes with a, hey, I really need to get rid of my Excel spreadsheet and the combination of these Excel spreadsheets with PowerPoint. Probably there is something to dig deeper there. So we have this process, which is, again, very similar, pretty sure, by a lot of people, where we demo the tool, showing what it can do. We, after, go with the user, identifying its audience. For who are you creating this dashboard? Is it for the management? Is it for everybody? Do you want to have it in a more exploratory way, so your user can play with filter? Or is it something more static? Up to you. Identify the data, but also identify the training needs. So probably some of them already familiar with data, joins, and etc. But some of them have no clue. So help them. And the idea is really to provide a set of tools, a driving license. We give them the key then. Then we accompany that business case for implementation. The idea here is that we give a platform to the end user. We're not the dashboard producer. We're not going to do the work for them. I cannot do the work for most of them anyway. But you provide a platform that makes them accountable of their data and their analysis. You bring back the ownership of the data to the user. You enforce their accountability on the numbers and the figures that they provide. And this process helps us really to have a happy community, people that are more and more autonomous, such as Tudor.
Thank you. So, thank you, Pierre-Benoit. One of the nights, actually, I earned my Tableau Spurs very early on, actually, in late 2015, when I started using Tableau on my own in a little corner. And I was quite happy in my sandbox. I was playing with Excel files. I was breaking all the Excel databases and all the Oracle databases. Luckily, those bosses are not here right now, so it's okay. But I was breaking all these types of files and playing with Tableau and learning how to use it, joining data. And it was quite interesting because I thought it was a great tool to do my analytics. And essentially, my evolution through Tableau was threefold. I mean, I learned a lot of my knowledge and my skills through Pierre-Benoit's team and his predecessor, and through all this onboarding process that he mentioned earlier. I mean, we've had sessions, we've had meetings, we've had tab doctors, and I learned a lot at work, through all these professional onboarding activities that they put at our disposal. So this was really a chance for me to explore the data and essentially play around with it. So I was quite lucky to have an environment where I would not have any deadlines yet, and where I could essentially learn Tableau on my own. And of course, Tableau having a dual license, I could also go back home and work on a bit at home. It's okay. So that was interesting at work, but I also wanted to kind of accelerate my understanding of Tableau. So I took online courses. I took various online courses on my own independently. I looked at the Tableau forums, and of course, you ask a question and someone across the world is answering your question, and lo and behold, you're now part of the community. And so this is how I joined the community as well. So I learned a lot by absorbing this knowledge, breaking the data, learning how to use Tableau, playing with all the figures, and so on. But another thing that is really interesting, I find, is when you're learning a tool or anything in general, it's one thing to absorb the knowledge and memorize it, but it's another thing to share it back with an audience. And so this is where the third point comes into play, where I essentially learned all this knowledge and I showed it back to my team. I was essentially the champion in my team, and I helped the rest of my team, my boss, my colleagues, to learn how it works. And it was a tremendous learning opportunity because I got to challenge my own understanding of what Tableau is. So essentially these three sections helped me become a Tableau expert. And what ended up happening are essentially 4 tenets that are actually very similar to the Tableau blueprint tenets that we saw yesterday in the keynote. In the sense that we actually managed to collect and implement a set of guidelines and best practices within our team and within our user base. So we were able to tell them, okay, we're using this format now, we're using these fonts, this is how we optimize extracts, this is how we produce these dashboards in order to have the best flow of information and get the information to the right people. So we actually developed organically a set of best practices for ourselves so that we could organize our data, and also within our user base, and we slowly started teaching them as well. And of course, a lot of these came from Pierre-Benoit's team, because obviously a lot of the knowledge came from them. How do we work with the server? What is the best way to work with the server, and how do we smartly produce dashboards and extracts that don't break the site? They have many times. So as I mentioned, we disseminate this information to our users, and of course the community grows. And from 2 people to 1,000 people, that's quite big in a couple of years. So slowly, various other teams had developed champions of their own, and before long, we had various meetings. Every time we've had a meeting, we would try and pick out the champions in each team and share knowledge. How do we make this? How do you make this field? How do you share the information? And everyone kind of got on the same level and started speaking the same language, which was great. And what ended up happening as a result of accumulating all this knowledge is that we were able to essentially offer data as a service, as opposed to just sending out a report and saying, peace, enjoy it. We were actually able to work with various teams at various levels of their processes. So we have, for example, one team who decides that they want to design the entire dashboard on their own because they're the experts. So all we have to do is provide the data, publish a data source, and have them play with it. We give them the correct site roles and so on, the permissions, and they actually design the dashboards, and they come back to us every now and again to ask questions. Other teams say, look, I don't have time for all this technical stuff. I just want the data. I just want to be able to see what my sales are. So we do that as well. So we actually offer data at various points in the process, and that's actually really interesting for us because now I'm moving from an analytical role to a site admin, and I'm learning a lot of interesting things. Of course, the flip side of this flexibility is governance. So it means that I have to, of course, just like Pierre-Benoit mentioned on the server side, I have to now manage my site correctly. I have to give the correct permissions, the correct site roles. I have to tell my users not to, create 10,000 extracts and move them around. It's not just like Excel. You can't just do everything the way you used to. So a lot of rules had to be implemented. But overall, this ended up becoming a great boon. And I say boon because obviously when you have boons, you also have curses. And when you have curses, you have transformations. So one of the transformations that I've undergone alongside my team is how we essentially transformed from a team that produces reports to a team that manages information and analytics. So to give you a bit of a context, what I do within my team in finance, so our team essentially goes through these 4 major processes. We collect data, we do reporting, we spend some time producing them, and we do some analytics. And so what that means is we actually use a variety of tools, or we used to, rather. We collect the data from our internal systems, from external providers, from other departments. We publish it, we clean it, and we produce the commercial reports for the institutional branch of Pictet Asset Management. So we were using, you can name them, we've got them, Excel, MicroStrategy, business objects, Python, R, everything. We've used all of them. And to various degrees of success. Depending on what tool you're using or what report you're creating, some person might like it. We have some people who still insist on printing 10,000 PowerPoint reports, and that one person is the bottleneck in all of our process, but we have to do it. So it's quite a challenge. So we spent all that time collecting the data, and we produced around 100, 110 reports per business cycle. Typically, this means around per month or per quarter or on an ad hoc basis, and a lot of them are automated, but they're a bit unwieldy, and they take a lot of time. And how much time? Well, to give you an idea, this took us around 12 to 15 business days per month. That's, if you think about it, there's around 20-odd days, business days in a month, which means by the time you're done, you can take a break, and then you have to start again. So it was actually becoming very repetitive to produce all these reports and spend all this time, producing the same data every month, and it was getting a bit on our nerves. And not only that, but we didn't have time to do the fun stuff, which is use our brains as humans and use our creativity. So we didn't do that many analytics that would solve interesting questions about the business. More than just look at our evolution of numbers. We wanted to actually ask ourselves proper questions. And so after Tableau, we had a bit of a drastic change. So we actually managed to reduce the amount of tools by 1, which is an amazing improvement, I know. However, thank you. However, what you have to understand is that obviously we removed 2 tools and we added Tableau, so there's that. But the point I'm trying to make is that we had 1 less tool, fine. So far, so good. Number of reports, gone down by 10%. Again, not a big deal. But now that we're using Tableau, a lot of our data model and a lot of our creation process is different. So our underlying processes by which the data comes and feeds the Tableau dashboards is now actually a lot smarter. So we can produce these reports faster. And I mean quite fast. We've been able to reduce these 12 to 15 days to around 2 to 3 days, which means I could be working right now because one of these reports is being done at work. So I'm actually have a lot more time to do the fun stuff, the analytics, and use my brain. And this is something that, so this change, this has taken us a couple months. And this, what essentially analytics is essentially just a period where we ask ourselves proper questions. Okay, what if we target these specific set of clients in this market? What do we want to know about them? Or what if our fees change? Or what if our performance dips up and down? Or what happens to our clientele? We want to ask ourselves very specific questions, and this is something that we can now do with Tableau because we spend less time on the conveyor belt of production and actually on the interesting things. So I'll give you an example of one of these reports that we've been able to improve, which I call the Holy Grail because obviously we're a lot younger now. We actually have a lot more of our brain cells than we used to do because we spend less time doing it. So typically in a business, you want to ask yourselves various questions. And obviously every business asks itself these kinds of questions. What markets are you profitable in? How do your clients evolve? Where do they come from? Which one was your most successful year? And of course, every business asks itself these questions. And what we used to do is we would produce a lot of different slides. And in our quest to overcome these questions, we were able to make an interesting observation. So to give you an idea, we were actually producing around 26 slides. We had this one flagship report. We produced around 26 slides. Picture it in your mind. 26 slides, 26 markets. That's around 600 pages. 3 minutes per slide. And this is something, and I'm talking someone who's at their desk focusing and clicking for days and days and producing these reports. And then sending email, dear Mary, dear John, oh crap, that was the other email, sorry. A lot of different problems that you can imagine by doing this. And now that we're using Tableau, we're able to reduce this to 2 hours. So I can actually take a coffee for 2 days and still say that I've done some work, which is impressive. And now all these dashboards, we've essentially reduced all there's no more paper. We've essentially published everything on the dashboard. All the permissions are set such that we have one dashboard on one site, and depending on the permissions of the person, and depending on the row-level permissions that we have implemented within the workbook, that same workbook can be accessed by 26 people, but they'll see different things, which is interesting, which is really exactly what we've been wanting to do, and not have to. And whenever one person asks to make an improvement, we do that improvement, and it flattens out across the entire organization, and everyone can see it, so everyone wins. And so, as a result, this is kind of one example. As a result of this transformation, we're able to see two big changes in our organization, one from a business perspective and one from a cultural perspective. From the business perspective, we're essentially allowing our users, our end users, so distribution, sales, and investment, and so on, to actually look at the number and say, okay, this is how much I'm selling, this is how much I'm performing, this is how much I'm managing, exactly, without having to flip through the papers and wonder what number is where, like why is this color the same. Everything is essentially at its right place, and all the numbers are clearly shown. They can actually look at the data earlier, because we don't take as many days to produce the reports. We can give them data in real time, pseudo real time, and have them actually make a decision much earlier than a month later. Because essentially what we were doing is we were taking 12 to 15 business days. So by the time the month ends, so that's what, 2-3 weeks? So by the time the following month is almost over, you've given them the figures of the previous month. That's too late. What are they going to do? Now that we have this tool, we can actually give them the data a couple days after the month ends, and they can make the decisions in real time. Which of course allows them to, and not just them, but us as well, to master our competitive advantage. I mean, we are an asset manager. We're not a company that looks at numbers and looks at Excel file. We're actually we manage assets, so we want to focus on what's important to us, the business. And from a cultural perspective as well, from my side at least, we're able to democratize data. I mean, this is a term we've heard all throughout the conference, but it is true. I mean, essentially, we've been able to offer the data to various stages of various people in the company. You've got the analyst in another team, or the CEO, or the CFO, or the VP of sales, and they're all able to look at the data and use it as they want. It allows me time to be more creative, and gives me time to use my brain and actually ask myself interesting questions rather than just click on reports and have them be produced on a conveyor belt. And finally, well, obviously, collaboration. I mean, it is a community. Once everyone speaks the same language of Tableau, everyone essentially can look at the same charts and compare the same figures and collaborate a lot more. I mean, we learn from their team, and then we show it to other teams, and then that team shows it to another team, and before long, the entire company is using Tableau, and everyone wins. So these two aspects are essentially the main, I would say, the biggest changes in the organization we've been able to achieve. And we're very proud of it. So without further ado, we'd like to thank you very much for the presentation, and we're open to questions.